All right, so everyone loves a good historical misconception, right? And today we are going to absolutely shatter one.
Oh, I love it. Do tell.
We've all heard about the Roman Empire falling, in 476 AD. End of story. But is that really the whole story?
I think our listeners probably know that it's...
Of course. So today we're going to deep dive into the Byzantine Empire. This is the empire that kept the Roman torch burning for another 1,000 years.
1,000 years. That's incredible.
We're going to be exploring this really intriguing period of history through the book Lost to the West by Lars Brownsworth. And listeners, by the end of this deep dive, you are going to have a solid grasp of what the Byzantine Empire was, why it matters even today, and some really surprising facts that I bet you didn't know.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about, a continuous thread of Roman history, the cultural shifts, the drama, the politics, and ultimately, what impact the Byzantines had on our world today. It's often overlooked, but it's an incredible story.
So we've got over 1,000 years of history to unpack here. Where do we even begin? Where does this forgotten empire even start?
Well, it starts way before 476. We have to go back to the 3rd century AD to Emperor Diocletian. That's where this whole Byzantine story really kicks off.
Okay, Diocletian. Vaguely remember him from history class. Wasn't he the one who realized that Rome was just getting a bit too big for its britches?
You got it. He was actually really practical emperor. He knew that governing this massive empire, well, it was becoming a total nightmare. It was just too vast to control,
So what did he do? Just slice it in half?
basically. He divided the Roman Empire into two more manageable pieces. We have the Western Roman Empire and then, of course, the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, he wasn't trying to create two separate empires. It was more about making things run smoother.
Divide and conquer, right? Or I guess divide and rule. But then comes Constantine the Great. That's when things really start to gravitate eastward, don't they?
Constantine was a total game changer. His decision to create a new capital, Constantinople, in 330 AD, that was huge. It not only shifted the political center of the Roman world east, but it also shows how important those eastern provinces were becoming.
Constantinople, this magnificent city on two continents. What a powerful image.
And strategically brilliant, right at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, Constantinople became a huge hub for trade, culture, and power. And of course, there's Constantine's decision to make Christianity the official religion, huge implications for both East and West. It really starts to lay the foundation for a distinct Eastern Roman identity.
And then, well, the Western Roman Empire ends up falling apart thanks to those, and I love this, belching brutes. Brownworth is so colorful in his writing.
He does not hold back.
But the East endures.
That's right. It's because of their location, a flourishing economy, really strong leadership. They managed to ride out all those storms that were battering the West. So while Western Europe is plunging into the Dark Ages, you have Constantinople holding on to Roman traditions and legal systems, becoming a true beacon of civilization.
It's incredible how they not only survived, but thrived for centuries. Amazing resilience. But they did more than just cling to the past, right? This wasn't just the Eastern Roman Empire anymore, was it?
You're getting it. This is where the term Byzantine Empire really comes into its own.
Yeah.
They saw themselves as the continuation of Rome, but over time they developed their own distinct identity, cultural, political, religious.
So they weren't just Romans in the East anymore, they were Byzantines. And this is what gets me so excited. Because when we think Dark Ages, we usually connect it to Rome falling. But the Byzantines, they kept the light of learning burning.
Exactly. They were flourishing, while Western Europe was struggling. Preserving those ancient Greek texts, building amazing things, think Hagia Sophia. And they developed these sophisticated legal systems. Art, science, philosophy. They were making advancements in all of these. In many ways, you could say they rescued Western civilization. They saved knowledge that would have been lost forever. They really laid the groundwork for the Renaissance that would come later.
Makes you think how different our world would be without them. They held back invaders and kept the light of knowledge alive. And speaking of holding the line, we've got to talk about Justinian. I feel like you can't study Byzantine history without running into this guy.
Justinian. Oh, he's a key player. Imagine an emperor who dreamt of bringing back the glory of Rome and actually managed to reconquer parts of the West. That was Justinian. Ambitious, driven. He really wanted to restore Roman rule.
Wow, so for a little while there, it looked like the Roman Empire might be back in action, but those reconquests, they were hard to hold on to, weren't they?
Unfortunately, his armies won North Africa and even bits of Italy, but it didn't last. They lost those western territories again.
Guess you can't turn back the clock, huh? But even without the West, Justinian's reign, it was huge for the Byzantines, right?
Oh, for sure. He's the one who codified Roman law into a system that is still influential today. And don't forget about what he built, the Hagia Sophia, a true masterpiece of Byzantine art and engineering. So yeah, he didn't bring back the whole Roman Empire, but his legacy is huge.
Oh, okay, so we've got this powerful empire in the East, thriving, holding off enemies, but I can't help but feel like there's some tension brewing with the West, like they're kind of drifting apart.
You're absolutely right. And this is where religion becomes a major factor. You see, as the Western Roman Empire was falling apart, the Pope in Rome became more and more powerful. But in the East, the emperors still had a lot of control over the church. And that difference, that was a recipe for conflict.
Yeah, I've read about the iconoclasm controversy. That just sounds like a mess waiting to happen. Emperors in the East banning religious icons.
Yep. Iconoclasm. It means literally image breaking. It was a wild time in the Byzantine world. Some emperors thought that showing respect to icons was like worshiping idols, so they tried to ban them.
I can imagine how well that went over with the Pope. It's like someone telling you how to practice your religion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Pope and the Western Church saw it as interference. They condemned iconoclasm. And this really started to drive a wedge between the East and West. It just made the political and cultural divide even worse.
So it's not just about the icons, it's about authority, right? Who's in charge when it comes to religion? This feels like a big turning point in how the East and West relate to each other.
You got it. And this rift, together with all the other differences between East and West, well, it finally explodes in 1054. The Great Schism. The Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church officially split, and that division is still with us today.
So we have all this pressure, internal, external religious disputes, and the East and West just drifting further apart. But there's one thing about the Byzantines that everyone knows: Constantinople.
Constantinople, an incredible city, strategically located right between Europe and Asia. It was like a melting pot. Markets, beautiful buildings, vibrant intellectual life. Known for its beauty, its wealth, its influence, it was the place to be.
And it stood strong for centuries. Attack after attack, they repelled them. How did they survive against so many enemies? I mean, they were facing Persians, Arabs, Bulgarians, even the Vikings.
They were masters of survival, that's for sure. Constantinople was heavily fortified with those massive walls and a strong navy, but it was more than just brute force. They were clever diplomats, pitting their enemies against each other, playing the long game.
Sounds like they were always on edge, always maneuvering to survive.
Exactly. But even the best defenses don't last forever. And that brings us to 1453, the arrival of a brand new power, the Ottoman Turks.
This is the part of the story I always get pulled into. The fall of Constantinople, this magnificent city that seemed invincible, finally brought down. Tell me more.
Get ready, because the fall of Constantinople, it's a story full of drama, brilliant strategies, and, sadly, tragedy. It truly is the end of an era.
Okay, before we get into that epic showdown, let's just take a second to think about everything we've talked about. From Diocletian dividing the Roman Empire to Constantinople rising up and all that tension with the West. It's pretty clear that the Byzantine Empire was a major force in the world. They weren't just surviving, they were shaping the world around them.
And as we go deeper, you'll see that their impact is still with us today. It's really mind-boggling when you think about it. What if the Byzantines hadn't held on for so long? What would have happened? I mean, all their neighbors to the east, they definitely wanted that land.
They were fighting Persians, Arabs, all those different Turkic groups. It just sounds exhausting, like a constant fight for survival.
And that's what's so amazing, right? So many threats, so many different fronts, and they still held on. For centuries. It's incredible. Their strategic thinking, the way they adapted, just brilliant.
It's like they were playing chess, and everyone else was stuck playing checkers. They outmaneuvered everyone, made alliances, kept everyone guessing.
Perfect analogy. But it wasn't just about military power. They were also amazing diplomats. They knew how to negotiate, how to use trade and cultural influence to their advantage. Really, the ultimate power players of their time.
Speaking of power, I've always loved the whole Byzantine court thing. All those rituals, the ceremonies, the clothes. It's like something out of a movie.
Oh, it was quite a spectacle. Imagine processions, glittering icons, emperors in these flowing purple robes, and then all those courtiers all trying to climb the ladders, whole system.
It's like Game of Thrones meets a fashion show.
Huh. Yeah, there's some similarities for sure, but it wasn't just for show. All those rituals, they were about projecting power, showing everyone who was in charge. And you have to remember, back then, symbols, they meant everything.
So it wasn't just about looking good. It was about making the emperor seem powerful, impressing all those foreign visitors, and keeping things in order. A carefully crafted performance.
You got it. And all of this was in this really diverse empire. I mean, the Byzantines weren't just a bunch of Greek speakers. They had all sorts of people, languages, religions, traditions.
Yeah, I think that's something we forget about empires. We think of them as one big blob, but it's so much more complicated than that. So how did they manage to hold together all those different people for so long?
You know, that's something historians are still debating. But some things seem pretty clear. They had a strong central government, a really well-developed legal system that made things fair, and a pretty good economy. That helps. And even though their identity was always changing, they still had this shared idea of being Roman, that connection to the past.
It sounds like they were great at blending things, right?
Mhm.
Roman, Greek, Persian, even Slavic traditions. They mixed it all into this unique Byzantine style.
They were definitely open to new ideas. They took the best from other cultures. They embraced Greek philosophy. They learned from the Arabs. They even took some things from Persian art and architecture. That's part of what made them last so long and be so creative.
It's amazing how they could do all that and still be distinctly Byzantine. It shows how sophisticated they were, how adaptable.
And their artistic legacy. That's just as amazing. We've talked about the Hagia Sophia, but it's more than just that. Their mosaics are world famous, their icons are still used in religious practices today, and their illuminated manuscripts. Absolutely breathtaking. Art and calligraphy combined.
There's something about their art, their architecture. It has this otherworldly beauty, like stepping back in time.
And it wasn't just about pretty pictures. Byzantine art had a purpose. It communicated religious ideas. It made people think about spiritual things. It was a way of connecting with something bigger than themselves.
Okay, so far we've been talking about this vibrant, powerful, resilient empire. But I'm guessing it wasn't all sunshine and roses, right? Didn't they have their fair share of palace intrigue, power struggles, maybe even a few assassinations?
Well, let's not get too romantic about things. No empire is perfect. Yeah. And, yeah, the Byzantine Empire, it definitely had its problems. Think about it, they lasted for over 1,000 years. There were bound to be times when things got a bit messy. Corrupt officials, people fighting for power. It's all part of the story.
Sounds like it could be pretty cutthroat at times. Only the strong survive. Or maybe the most cunning.
You might be right. The fight for power, it could get pretty fierce. Sometimes it did lead to violence, intrigue. But it's important to remember that there were often really complex reasons behind those power struggles. Religion, economics, personal ambition. It wasn't always good guys versus bad guys.
That's true. History is rarely that simple. It's full of shades of gray.
Exactly. So yeah, we can talk about the bad stuff, but we also have to remember all the good stuff. Their achievements, their impact on the world. They were this bridge between the ancient world and the medieval world. They really did shape the course of history.
They fought off so many enemies, saved so much knowledge, spread so many cultural ideas. I don't even want to think about what Europe would look like without them.
I know, right? Their story just goes to show that history is full of surprises. It's all about finding those forgotten empires, those civilizations we don't learn about enough. We have to challenge what we think we know and dig a little deeper. That's how we get a better understanding of the past.
It's like putting together a giant puzzle. The more pieces you find, the more you realize how connected everything is, how complicated.
That's what makes it so exciting. There's always something new to discover, a new way of looking at things. And the more we dig into these forgotten parts of history, the more we learn about what it means to be human.
I'm already thinking about doing more research. The Byzantine Empire, it's like this huge, intricate tapestry.
Yeah.
And we've only just started to see the threads.
I totally agree. We've talked about their beginnings, how they rose to power, all their accomplishments, even their internal struggles. But there's still so much more to learn.
So for those listening who want to find out more, where should they go? What else would you recommend?
Well, definitely check out Lost to the West by Lars Brownsworth. It's a great place to start. Really engaging and easy to understand. But there are a ton of other books and resources out there too. If you want something that covers a lot, John Julius Norwich's A Short History of Byzantium is a classic.
And of course, we live in the digital age. There are some amazing documentaries and online resources about the Byzantines. You can practically bring that world to life.
For sure. The main thing is to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and just let yourself get drawn in by the Byzantine world. It's a fascinating journey, and you'll be surprised by what you discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, before we finish up this deep dive, let's zoom out a bit. We've covered a lot of their rise, their challenges, how resilient they were, their impact on the world. But there's one big thing we can't ignore. The fall of Constantinople in 1453. Such a dramatic moment in history.
It's a moment that still matters today. The fall of Constantinople, it wasn't just the end of an empire. It was a huge power shift in that whole region.
I can't even imagine what it must have been like. This city that stood for over 1,000 years, surviving siege after siege, and then it falls. It must have felt like the end of the world.
It was a turning point, for sure. A new era was beginning. And the Ottomans, they were a force to be reckoned with. Their military technology was so advanced, their strategy was brilliant.
I remember reading about those cannons they used to break through the walls of Constantinople. Can you imagine seeing that?
It
Terrifying.
was a game changer. Cannons were pretty new back then. And using them to take Constantinople, well, it changed how wars were fought forever. Those legendary walls, they couldn't stand up to that kind of firepower.
There's something almost poetic about it, isn't there? This ancient city, a symbol of power, brought down by this new, almost futuristic technology. Even the mightiest empires can crumble.
Exactly. But just because Constantinople fell doesn't mean the Byzantines disappeared completely. Their influence is still here today, and not always in the ways you might think.
That's what I love about this. We think of fallen empires as ancient history, but the Byzantines, they left a mark on the world's culture, politics, religion. Where do you see their biggest impact?
Well, their legal system, for one, it had a huge influence on how law developed, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the world too. Remember Justinian's Code, that massive project we talked about? It became like a blueprint for legal systems. And you can still see some of those ideas in modern law.
That blows my mind. A legal system from the 6th century, still relevant in the 21st century. That's an impact that lasts.
And their impact on religion is huge. They were the birthplace of Eastern Orthodoxy. Their theology, their traditions, they're still shaping the lives of millions of people around the world.
I've always been drawn to Orthodox churches. They have this incredible beauty, this sense of spirituality, those domes, the mosaics. It's like you're transported to another time.
It's the power of Byzantine art and architecture. They knew how to create spaces that inspire you, make you think. And those traditions, they didn't die with the empire. They kept evolving, kept influencing other artists and architects.
You can see their influence everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Russian icons, Islamic architecture, they really did have a global reach.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget about trade. Constantinople was this major trading hub. It connected East and West. Their merchants were a big part of the global economy, exchanging goods, sharing ideas, spreading cultural influences.
They were right in the middle of those ancient trade routes, weren't they? Bringing silk and spices from the East, connecting different parts of the world, kind of like the original globalists.
They were definitely ahead of their time in many ways, but as we've seen, their story is complicated. Powerful, but vulnerable. Innovative, but with their share of problems.
It shows that history isn't always neat and tidy. There are ups and downs, good times and bad times, and that's what makes it so interesting.
You said it. And when we study the Byzantine Empire, we're not just looking at some civilization from the past. We're learning about power, resilience, cultural exchange, and how the past still matters today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key things you want our listeners to remember about the Byzantine Empire?
I think the main thing is that they were so much more than just a footnote to Rome. They were a major player, a vibrant civilization that shaped the world for over 1,000 years.
Survivors, innovators, cultural bridge builders. A story of resilience, adaptation, and a lasting impact.
Exactly. Their empire might be gone, but their legacy is still with us. In art, architecture, law, religion, cultural traditions, the world wouldn't be the same without them.
So well said. And for our listeners who want to learn more, check out Lost to the West by Lars Brownsworth. It's a great introduction to this amazing world.
And for those who really want to go deep, there are so many books, documentaries, online resources. The world of Byzantium is waiting to be explored.
So until next time, keep those minds working, keep digging into history, and keep asking questions. You never know what amazing things you'll find. All right, so last time we were talking about the fall of Constantinople, 1453. The end of an era, a magnificent city brought down. It must have been a huge deal.
Oh, it absolutely was. I mean, the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans, it sent shockwaves everywhere. Europe, the Middle East. It was like the whole world was changing.
It's hard to imagine what it must have been like for people back then. This city that had stood for so long, over 1,000 years, and it had survived so many attacks.
It really does make you think. It was the end of the Byzantine Empire. But it also shifted the balance of power. The Ottomans, they were a force to be reckoned with. Incredible military technology, really smart strategies.
And those cannons, right. I read about how they use cannons to break through the walls. That must have been a terrifying sight.
Oh, totally. Cannons were still pretty new back then. And using them like that against Constantinople, well, it changed warfare forever. Those walls, they had protected the city for centuries. But against cannons, no chance.
It's kind of poetic in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
This ancient city, a symbol of power taken down by this new technology, like something out of the future. It shows that even the strongest empires can fall.
It does. But even though Constantinople fell and the Byzantine Empire ended, that doesn't mean they just disappeared. They left a mark on the world, a lasting one.
That's what always gets me. We tend to think about these fallen empires as ancient history, but the Byzantines, they still have an impact today. It's amazing. Where do you see their biggest impact?
Well, their legal system, for one. It really shaped how law developed. Think about Justinian's Code. We talked about it before. That was a huge project. And it wasn't just for the Byzantines. It became a model for legal systems all over the world. And, some of those ideas are still around today.
That's incredible. A legal system from the 6th century, still relevant today. Wow.
And then there's religion. The Byzantine Empire was where Eastern Orthodoxy really took shape. And that tradition, it's still going strong. Millions of people follow it today.
I've always loved Orthodox churches. There's something so beautiful, so spiritual about them. Those domes, the mosaics, it's like you're in a different world.
That's the power of Byzantine art and architecture. They created these spaces that make you feel awe, that make you think. And those traditions, they didn't just vanish. They spread. They influenced other artists, other architects.
Their influence is everywhere, right? Russian icons, Islamic architecture, they were a global force.
They really were. And we can't forget about trade. Constantinople was this incredible trading center. It linked east and west. Their merchants were all over the place, exchanging goods, but also ideas, cultural influences.
They were right there on those ancient trade routes, bringing silk and spices from the east, connecting different parts of the world. It's like they were the original globalists.
Huh? Yeah, you could say that. They were way ahead of their time in a lot of ways. But as we've seen, they weren't perfect. Powerful, yes, but also fragile. Innovative, but with internal problems too.
I think it shows that history is never simple. It's full of twists and turns, good and bad, and that's what makes it so interesting to explore.
Absolutely. Studying the Byzantines, it's about more than just an empire. It's about power, survival, cultural exchange. It's about how the past shapes who we are today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways you want our listeners to remember about the Byzantine Empire?
I think the most important thing is that they were so much more than just a continuation of Rome. They were a force in their own right, a vibrant, influential civilization that had a huge impact on the world.
Survivors, innovators, cultural bridge builders. Their stories about resilience, adapting to change, and leaving a legacy that lasts.
You got it. And while their empire might be gone, they're not forgotten. Their influence is still with us: art, architecture, law, religion, culture. The world wouldn't be the same without them.
I love that. Well, for our listeners who want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Lost to the West by Lars Brownsworth. It's a great introduction to this amazing world.
And if you want to go even deeper, there's a whole world of books, documentaries, online resources out there. The Byzantine Empire is just waiting to be discovered.
It sounds like an adventure. So until next time, everyone, keep those minds curious, keep exploring history, and keep asking questions. You never know what you might find.